pretty hard on you. The Democrats have been pretty hard on you, but also some conservatives have been pretty hard on you as well. The National Review had a story saying that, you know, I can't tell if Sarah Palin is incompetent, stupid, unqualified, corrupt, or all of the above.
Who wrote that one?
That was in the National Review. I don't have the author.
I'd like to talk to that person.
Here's the problem. The CNN reporter took the quote completely out of context. The column was actually an indictment of the media, not the governor, but of the media. Here's the quote in context. Watching press coverage of the Republican candidate for vice president, it's sometimes hard to decide whether Sarah Palin is incompetent, stupid, unqualified, corrupt, backward, or, well, all of the above. Now, as the attacks on Governor Palin continue, Senator McCain is fighting back, defending his running mate on Don Imus's radio show.
Which is better, serve 35 years in the United States Senate and say you got to divide Iraq into 3 different countries? Or is it better to have been governor of a state and a reformer and give people their tax dollars back and bring about reform of the way that your state does business? Which is better?
Well,
I think it's pretty obvious, and so because she's not known she hasn't been in the Georgetown cocktail party, or maybe some in Manhattan, then I think she's most qualified of any that has run recently for vice president. To tell you the truth, and she's ignited our crowds. She has a wonderful family, a great husband, great values, great standards, and she shares my worldview.
Is Governor Palin the victim of blatant unfair treatment across the board? Joins us live is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who has just released a new documentary about America's energy future called We Have the Power. Mr. Speaker, nice to see you. And what do you make of CNN's reporter getting it really wrong and so insultingly wrong? And we haven't seen an apology yet to Governor Palin, but what do you think about it?
Well, I think the elite media's attack on Governor Palin again and again has been factually wrong, intellectually dishonest, totally biased, worthy of the Polish state news media attacking Lech Walesa back in the 1980s. I mean, this is a kind of deliberate, vicious, dishonest, total distortion of who Governor Palin is, including, by the way, the Saturday Night Live skits, some of which I think were slander and were worthy of a lawsuit. And I think that the American people should realize that the elite media on the left is so desperate to elect Barack Obama that the view they're giving you of Governor Palin is fundamentally a falsehood. And the one you saw from CNN is so outrageous that they owe her an absolute apology. But frankly, Katie Couric misquoted Henry Kissinger. Earlier than that, ABC News misquoted the Bush doctrine. Again and again, you've seen elite reporters do things that were false in order to try to make Governor Palin look bad.
You know, it's sort of interesting. I mean, it is our job in the media to challenge her aggressively on issues. That's our job. Governor Palin or Senator Obama or anyone running for office, that's our job. But it is so profoundly personal. Is the media, when they get these quotes wrong, and this so-called, I don't know what the elite media is, but whatever it is it deliberate or is it incompetence?
No, it's deliberate. Look, you and I have a fundamentally different view, Greta. When the New York Times goes out of its way for the second time in 3 weeks to run a page-one attack piece on Cindy McCain, to have a totally biased coverage. If you were to look at the coverage that Michelle Obama has gotten and the coverage Cindy McCain has gotten, you have to believe that the fix is in. When you look at the magazine covers, you look at the pictures that are taken, again and again, over and over for the last year, we have been brainwashed, propagandized, insultingly lectured by the news media. If you look at what happened to Joe the plumber, you know, Joe Biden, in the middle of that vice presidential debate, was totally wrong about the restaurant he claims to go to learn about the middle class because it went out of business in 1986. Now, I haven't seen anybody in the elite media doing a live broadcast from the non-existent Katie's restaurant to point out that Joe Biden is just out of touch with reality. He's either dishonest or has a total memory lapse about his hometown. Yet nobody notices it. And again, I think there were 14 factual mistakes by Biden in the vice presidential debate. Nobody said that disqualified him. This has been a totally one-sided campaign in which the news media has been the best ally that Barack Obama has gotten. And we ought to be honest about it. There is no pretense, not a shred of neutrality on the part of the major networks or the New York Times.
Today on Greta Wire, which is the blog, at 1:08, I put a blog entry in which says the arrogance, and then I put the question, who's the dummy? And I guess for me, it's really hard to understand how arrogant the media can be. When you think about it, Governor Palin had to be elected by the city to become mayor, elected by the state to be governor, and to become a journalist. All you have to do is say, I'm a journalist. You don't even have to take a test. And if the journalists don't agree with her, they tag her stupid when she has done nothing but do her job very effectively.
Well, I'd be curious. I've not had a chance to do this. I've been thinking about having one of my researchers look at every single elite media interview with Governor Palin to see if any of them ask her how she gave $1,300 a person back to Alaskans as a tax break, how she negotiated and got so much money out of big oil, how she worked out the deal for the natural gas pipeline, or anything of substance about how she shaped an $11 billion budget involving 29,000 employees of the state government. I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, there has been a single question by an elite television journalist about her actual career in Alaska. And I think it is the most insulting, and I can't say this too strongly. This is like watching Pravda. This is a one-sided, vicious, unending, and dishonest campaign. And then when you look at the poll numbers, all they tell you is that in the short run, being brutalized by the national media has an impact. And by the way, I want to go back to Joe the plumber. Here's an innocent guy whose only mistake was he took on Barack Obama in a way that was very painful, and maybe the reason you have two polls this evening that show this race too close to call, because Joe the plumber pointed out he didn't want some politician spreading his wealth to that politician's cronies and allies.
You know, one of the viewers wrote me, because we reported last week that Senator Obama was quoted in the New York Magazine, and I'm sure I'm going to get this quote wrong, and I don't want to make the same mistake that CNN has, but something to the effect that he would be about 3 points higher in the polls if it were not for Fox News. A viewer emailed me, what would his numbers be if it weren't for MSNBC and CNN? Where would his poll numbers be? That question was not posed.
Well, and where would he be without the New York Times, which has been the most unendingly dishonest newspaper in America this year, and which is really a disgrace. This was once a great newspaper, and it is now a totally one-sided and totally distorted publication that does remarkably bad coverage of the race, that hasn't looked into even something as simple as what happened to Senator Obama when he was at Columbia University, which is in New York City, where the New York Times is published. So it just tells you how one-sided their coverage is.
Well, you know, it's one thing good about law, and you and I have fought about lawyers. At least we have a statute of limitations that we all agree about how far you can go back. We have rules of evidence for searching facts. We have code of professional responsibility. We know the difference between hearsay and real evidence, hearsay being almost anonymous sources or gossip, and we take a test of competency. So let me just put the plug for the legal profession, which you and I battle about, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, all right.
I'm not going to go off on that. I'm happy to stay on the news media.
All right, good. All right. Tell me, what's the story? Give me the state of this race at this point.